by 12:30.
Hello, everyone. We got a couple more minutes. We'll start at 11 on this dot here. We got a lot of great information. We're excited to share with you. So start in a couple minutes.
We're going to start in a couple. I'm going to grab my glasses.
All right, it's 11 o'clock here. We'll start May's webinar, safety webinar. Today's topic is OSHA's top 10 most cited violations for 2021. Today's presenter is myself. My name is Kasey Clowe. I'm the regional director here at OECS. A little bit about me. I have over 20 some years of safety director experience in commercial construction. I've been at OECS here for a little over 3 years. Our guest speaker will have Donna. She'll just give a brief introduction to what she does here at OECS.
Hi, everybody. I'm Donna Hetland. I started with OECS in 2017. When I started, I came in with a little bit of construction background, a little bit of general industry background, and now primarily I focus on general industry and manufacturing. I do have a passion for teaching. I spent a little bit of time in a past life teaching kindergarten through junior high. So what a great way to put my two passions together between education and safety. So here we are.
Awesome. And then we have a special guest today. Since we're dealing with OSHA, I thought it'd be great to bring in Mr. Andy Smoka. He's got 28 years of Minnesota OSHA experience. He's got more stories. He's probably forgot more information than I know, but he'll be great. Feel free to use that chat box to ask any questions that you have about any information that we cover or any OSHA related topics, and we'll make sure Andy takes a look and helps out. So we like to start off each webinar series, if you've been a regular attendee, with a poll question. And so the first question is, has your organization ever received an OSHA citation?
OSHA visit.
Oh, sorry. I was reading the poll box. Sorry. Has your organization ever received an OSHA visit? And we'll just take 5 seconds here. A for yes, B for no. Kind of like to know what our audience is dealing with.
Kasey, we have the end poll. Oops,
Okay.
we have some more people. So right now we're at 75% that has answered. So we just have a few more people. But right now we're leaning towards the yes.
Very common here in the state of Minnesota. OSHA is very active, so I'm not surprised, frankly, of that. Today's agenda.
Sorry, that was the yes. So there we go.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yep, look at there. Almost 60% said yes. Today's agenda, we're going to first start talking about OSHA violations and their penalty structure. Then we'll get into the meat and potatoes of OSHA's top 10 cited items. And then we'll finish off of what to expect from OSHA in 2022, their national emphasis and local emphasis programs. The top 10 serious violations of 2021. Here they are. Andy, do you want to just give a brief description of what a serious violation is?
In the words of OSHA, a serious is something is significant going to happen to an individual, where it's possible hospitalization is going to occur or fatality. It's going to be one of the two. It's not a paper cut.
All right. And then the top 10 from 2021 is fall protection. And ever since I got into safety, I'm not surprised. It's usually at the top of the list. And as you can see, it's almost a little over 4,000 violations happened in 2021. That's almost double of what number 2 is, respiratory protection at 2,000. Then you have ladder safety, and we'll go into further detail on how to help protect your organizations from these types of citations. You have scaffold, lockout, tagout, PPE, the hand or the eye and face, hazard communication, or in Minnesota right to know. Fall protection, the training requirements. A lot of people were getting cited for lack of fall protection training. And then to round out the top 10, you have powered industrial trucks, AKA forklifts, and then machine guarding. So the next list that we like to share with you is the top 10 willful violations of 2021. Andy, do you want to give a brief description on what that is?
When we get to the willful, it's you as your company are fully aware of what's happened before, but are reluctant to make any changes. And they get a second visit by OSHA and observe this first one, and they look at it from the second. And so knowing that you are fully aware of it, it becomes a willful, and the dollar amounts are tenfold. So if you're in a federal state, if you're North Dakota, South Dakota, Wisconsin, a serious violation would be 13,900. A willful violation would be 131,000. So it escalates very quickly. Minnesota would be 7,000 to 70,000 for a willful.
Andy, I have a question for you.
Yep.
So I've heard terminology of a repeat. So if OSHA comes in and they cite a company for a serious kind of a citable offense, if they come back in a short period of time, when does it turn from a repeat to a willful? Is that just kind of up to what the
Willful is, it's a higher step than a repeat. Repeat, you can get 2 repeats. Okay, so you had a fall protection problem. It could be a general industry at 4 foot or construction at 6 foot. And they come back a second time and they see it, everything identical, same site. Well, that's the first repeat. Then they come back again. Now, it's more apt to happen for repeats and willful in construction than it is in general industry. There's a 5-year window where they start all over again. Well, the odds are of being inspected twice in a 5-year window in general industry is far removed, because there's over 120,000 different general industry firms, and there's only like 60 enforcement personnel out there.
So this leads us to the second poll question. Now that you've seen the top 10 lists, has your organization ever received one of these OSHA citations from the previous list? And we'll just take 10 seconds here. Answer A for yes and B for no.
Kasey, while we're waiting, there's a chat that came up. Somebody asked if we'd be able to sending out a deck. And I think what they're wondering is if afterwards will we send out a copy of the presentation? And I think if it's mentioned in chat, we can get that to you after.
Yeah,
There's also, this is also being recorded, so if somebody needs a recording of it, it's going to be recorded and you can use that as well.
perfect. So just take a couple more seconds here. Justine will get us
Yeah.
the result.
We're, yeah, we can end the poll now. We have 72%. So a high percentage going to the no. So let me share the results here for you.
All right, no.
Oh, higher
So
percentage.
a lot of safe organizations, and that's great. I kind of like, because this data is a national wide database, so I kind of like to know what's going on locally here.
Kasey, another question came up, if you're good, let's see if I can get to it. Somebody says, I've been told that North Dakota, if I can read it, North Dakota states, counties, cities do not fall under OSHA and regulate themselves. Why do other businesses fall under OSHA, but those entities do not? That's a contradiction, right? North Dakota falls under federal.
OSHA.
Federal.
What were they trying to say in their question?
Let me see if I can open it up here. I've been told that North Dakota state, county, and cities do not fall under OSHA and they regulate themselves. Why do other businesses fall under
You said
OSHA?
it right there, by saying cities and municipalities, they don't, federal, state, they don't fall under OSHA. In Minnesota, they do.
Okay.
Because we're a state plan state, we can broaden the range. In a federal state, they can't do that.
So who covers those areas?
Just just exactly what she said. They take care of themselves.
Interesting. So in this slide, I kind of like it. Andy alluded to earlier. They actually increased the penalty amount in January of 2022. So now, if you're in a federal state OSHA program, now it went from 13,000 to 14,500 for a serious. The repeats and willfuls, as you can see, jumped from the 130s up to now 145. In Minnesota, even though half the fines are half as much, so in Minnesota, serious would be a little over 7,000. They're getting pressure by the feds to increase their penalties to match the federal penalties. So look for that in probably a few years, but just to give you the insight on how the financial side of receiving a citation. And like Andy said, you're on the hook for 5 years. So if you have a fall protection issue, back in 2018 and you get a citation, you could fall into that repeat. And so that's where a lot of companies get in trouble.
Well, not only that, but in general industry, if you have multiple plants in other states, it's a federal, so it all goes into the computer bank. And they could see a company that might have a plant in South Carolina or a plant in California, and they got cited for, say, machine guarding. Well, that would be the first offense, even though it didn't happen in North Dakota or Wisconsin. They'll just put in the information, it comes the name of the company, how many different facilities and how many times that gets cited. Without your knowledge, suddenly it shows up that you're at a willful. You go, how did this ever occur? Well, you have to look at the company as a whole, which makes it difficult if you're into construction, because some firms have 8 offices throughout the United States. If they get a fall protection issue in one of the states, and it happens again and again, you can see where repeat can happen very quickly, and then you can get into willfuls. That's why all the major companies will fight every one of the citations. But the bigger one, I want you to see at the bottom where it says failure to abate per day. In general industry, this is where I told you should put up a guardrail system at the loading dock. And today being May 6th, right?
5th, Cinco de Mayo.
And then I come back in 30 days to see, have you is it a failure to abate or did you fix it? And it looks like it's still the same way as I seen 30 days ago. So then what they'll do is they'll just take that 14,500, multiply it times 30. And suddenly you go, whoa, wait a second, you know, it's only some pipes. I can get this done for 2,000. Well, you didn't. So it's going to cost you like $500,000 now.
They add up quickly.
It adds up real fast, and no forgiveness on that. That failure to abate, it blindfolds people.
So the number one, fall protection, the general requirements. So as an employer, you have to protect all your employees from walking/working surfaces that are unprotected at 6 foot in height in construction, 4 foot in general industry. And how you protect them is using guardrails, safety nets. You don't see those too common, but you do see them, or use some kind of personal fall arrest system. So your action plan should be, you should walk the sites, get to know it, have those pre-con meetings, right? Discuss the hazards that your employees could face out in the field. Conduct regular inspections, and this is what we do all the time, is do audits out in the field, because we're looking for this. We're coaching them up on how to recognize hazards and take proper corrective actions. Got to train your employees. We at OECS train on the construction side of things during the annual training session. We do this every year. Your new employee that missed that annual training, they have to receive this before they step on the job site, and have a fall protection plan. We see a lot of lapses in this, and this stems to having that pre-con to discuss what possible situations your employees could face, and most importantly, have a rescue plan. Me coming from an ironwork background, that was a common issue. If we're working 30 feet in the air on a beam, and we got our 6 foot lanyard with a beamer clamp, we fall down, we're dangling 15, 20 feet in the air. How are we going to get them down? Is there ladders, scissor lifts, boom lifts in the area? Because you got 15 minutes to get them down, well, to avoid suspension trauma.
So you'll notice when Kasey and I kind of tag team through this, he's talking about some of the citable OSHA citations through construction. The ones that I'm going to tackle are OSHA citations that have come through general industry or manufacturing types of facilities. But make no mistake, any of these that Kasey and I are talking about, you could see them cited, whether it's construction or general industry. So kind of keep your eyes open for these. Number two, we're looking at respiratory protection. This comes into play if companies have some kind of a known respiratory type of a hazard, and that can be anything from dust all the way up to if it's vapors or fumes. A couple of the items that we look for here is, you'll see recurring message in here in everything that Kasey and I talk about. It basically starts with your written program. You've got to have a written program that tells you what the direction is of how are you going to protect your employees. That written program also will tell you whose responsibility is what when we're talking about all of these topics. So along the lines of respiratory protection, you can see a few things that companies and employees need to tackle. You do need to look that facility over and make sure that you are looking at work-specific procedures. What all needs to be tackled here to ensure that an employee doesn't incur any kind of a respiratory illness. This could come all the way down to making sure that once you do determine you have a known exposure at the facility, now you have to look at making sure that there's a respiratory selection. Whose responsibility is it to help employees choose the type of respirator that's going to help them? There's also training that's involved in every single one of these modules. If you're not training your employees, you're missing the boat on those. Also, if you put into place a respiratory protection program, now there's a couple of areas that we talk about that you've got to tackle. Medical evaluations. You have to get your employee medically evaluated before they ever put a respirator on their face. And what those medical evaluations do is help make sure that the employee is really physically fit to put a respirator on their face. And then after that, you're able to do something that's called a fit test. And what you're doing is really putting the respirator on the employee's face to make sure that they get a good solid, tight seal so that they're not going to be exposed to those exposures, those hazardous agents that could be in your facility. And then we talk a little bit about how is it supposed to be used? How are they supposed to clean it? And how are they gonna make sure that it's stored? Kasey, can you go to the next screen? Let's talk very briefly about your action plan. Again, it all goes back to your training. Make sure that you've got that written program that's your solid base of what you're supposed to be doing. Train the employees on what the hazards are, and then moving into that, train the employees on how to use the respirator. In this area, we talk heavily about respirators being PPE, your personal protective equipment, right? But remember your hierarchy of safety controls, and what companies really need to do is to go all the way back to the beginning. First, look at your ventilation system. Is your ventilation beefed up enough to make sure that you're helping try to pull some of those hazards out of the air before you put a respirator on it? And then everything else falls into place after that. You just really have to make sure that the employees are using the respirator appropriately. And then going over those medical evaluations for anybody that is required to wear. Medical evaluations can be done by a primary, a professional healthcare person. And then the fit tests, every single year, you need to make sure you're offering those fit tests to your employees to make sure that they get a good solid fit.
Yeah, a lot of times in construction, how many times do you see a half mast just laying on the floor, you know?
Yep.
Well, the thing on the male side, you went through all the key elements, except that they have to be clean shaven.
Huh, thanks,
No
Andy.
beard.
Good, right? Exactly.
And that's where push comes to shove, is that, well, I'm not going to shave. Well, then you're not going to be working.
Well, and the importance, right, Andy, the importance with the shaving is now when you try to go do that fit test, that respirator isn't going to give you a good solid seal.
And,
No.
and that's where the problem is.
Number 3, ladders. So the general requirements are ladders need to extend 3 feet above the top walking/working surface. I like to add this picture here, this top one here, where you have the extension ladder tied to the the gutter system. But we're all taught on the construction side, 3 rungs and you're good, right? But if you take a little closer look at that extension ladder above that top rung, is that a full foot, the side rails? No. So that's a little trick sometimes that they'll cite you on, because you would think 3 rungs were 3 feet, we're good to go. But really you're probably 2 foot, maybe 8 inches or so. So always, we recommend going at least probably 4 rungs high. Have them, don't stand on top of the ladders. We see this all the time, or standing on that second to top step. It's very common. You got to read, it says, do not stand. And then having that proper setup, 3 points of contact, and having your ladder at a 75.5-degree angle. And I always recommend everyone download this app. It's for free. It's the NIOSH ladder safety app. And it's great. All you do is turn it on, put it against your ladder, and it'll measure for you the degree at what it's at. So if you're at that 75.5 degrees, you'll see it green. If you're too, steep or too shallow, it'll let you know. So I've seen Minnesota OSHA consultation use this before. So it's a great app to measure what angle you're at. Number 4, scaffolding. You have to have a competent person to construct and to inspect your scaffold. And it's got to be inspected prior to each use. Fall protection, if you're over 10 foot above a lower level, you need a guardrail system or some kind of fall protection system. So that's a little bit different than that 6 foot fall protection rule, or the 4 foot in general industry. If you're working on scaffold, it's 10 foot. You have to have proper ladder access. Can't be climbing on the cross braces or the end rail that has the struts. And it's got to be supported by base plates or mud seals. We see this a lot in construction. They're working on concrete and they won't have base plates. No, you have to have base plates. It's got to be fully planked. You don't want anything greater than 1 inch a gap. And you have to use guardrails, and make sure you have end rails. That's the biggest thing that we see, especially when you're using scaffold with outriggers, not having the end rails to protect someone from walking off the end as they're busy working. A good action plan, you have to train your employees before they use the scaffold. You have to deem a competent person. And Andy, what's a competent person?
A competent person, by definition, is one that's hand-selected by the employer based on his knowledge of whatever they're going to be doing. And scaffolding is specific to scaffolding. For excavation, it's specific in that arena. And the reason they handpick that individual is that the citation never goes to the competent person. It goes to the employer. So when that employer, he's selecting the individual that will protect him and ensure that no hazard exists. And if there is, they have the authority to stop work, make corrections, and go back to work.
Mhm. Exactly. They have to demonstrate proper setup and again, audit, have us come out there, have that competent person document what they're seeing. They should document their inspections, because if it's not been documented in OSHA's eyes, it never happened.
Right.
So number 5, I'll let Donna take this one.
Number 5, we're going to discuss a little bit of hazard communication. Now, remember, if you're over on the Minnesota side, this is also called Minnesota Employee Right to Know. Well, what do you have a right to know? This has everything to do with any of the hazardous chemicals that you're using within your company, but we also think about this along the lines of just hazardous agents. So if you've got dust or if you've got vapors, fumes, things like that floating in your air, these are some of the things you've got to think about. Again, how many times have we talked about written programs? You've got to have that base that tells you exactly who's doing what and what the plan is to protect employees from chemicals that could be present in your workplace. We'll talk a little bit about what labeling means. And as far as everybody else knows, you've gone through training before, what safety data sheets do for you. The safety data sheets really have all of the chemical information in them that will tell the employees what the hazardous nature is of this product that they're tasked with using. Safety data sheets are needing to be available for employees 24/7. So I can imagine manufacturing facilities don't have a very tough time having safety data sheets available. It's pretty easy for manufacturing. How about construction?
Yeah.
It's a tougher situation to try to make sure those safety data sheets are on site. Do you guys run into that quite a bit on the construction side?
For sure, exactly. And a lot of them are going towards electronic.
Right.
And Andy, what recommendations can you make for making sure that they have access to it on a job site?
Well, you used to never be allowed, they always had to have a paper copy. But today, because of electronics, with people having tablets and cell phones, it's unacceptable. But you got to make sure when you're doing this process that the product label is the same as what the material or the safety data sheet says. Because there are some instances where the safety data sheet is up to date, but the product you're using isn't. So we have to always make sure that we have the right item in our hand. A good example would be OD cement. One's got methyl ethyl ketone in it, which is a carcinogen, and a new product doesn't have it. But we still have the old product being used.
Mm-hmm. And they have to have access to it. A lot of people have tablets with lock screens on it, right?
Yep.
So they have to know the password to be able to use it, or they need to know how to use a tablet. A lot of people still aren't very technologically sound.
Right, and readily available is the key with that. You want to make sure that the employees they don't have to ask permission to go get it. They've got to be able to have access to that 24/7 whenever they have a shift. So your action plan really comes down to this, again, making sure that you have a good solid program that's written. But one of the things that is top recommendation here is to look your facility over, look your job sites over, and make sure that you have a good solid inventory of all those chemicals that might be in the employee's vicinity. Then what you can do is after you take that inventory of chemicals, now you make sure you go have all the corresponding safety data sheets available for the employees. Part of what we chat about here is that you really, upon new hire, you have to give your employees this training before they even hit the ground running. You got to inform them on what the hazards are that they're going to be seeing, what the chemicals are that they're going to be tasked with using. So training is huge here. You've got to train your employees in the beginning and just, retrain again when there is another known hazard that's going to be present. Briefly, we got to talk a little bit about labeling and storage. So what you're looking for with that is, Andy kind of alluded to this, You make sure any of your original containers have a label on them, and what those labels are giving you is really a mini safety data sheet of what that chemical is all about. But then also you have to keep an eye on those secondary containers. If you've got squirt bottles and other types of containers that you've taken the chemical out of the original container and now put it into something small, you also have to have those secondary containers labeled. And that's a pretty hot area for citation for manufacturing and for general industry. Do your best.
If I had one thing to mention, is this is probably the most common thing that Minnesota OSHA asks. When they come out to a job site, they'll ask, who's the foreman and who's your apprentice? Because they're going to go up to that apprentice and say, did you have your right to know or HAZCOM training? Because in Minnesota, it's required every year to have this training. And then, you know, the apprentice will be look around, you know, often they won't have the training, or the new hire, I should say. Or if, you know, the new hire, you know, tries to pull one over, they'll say, yeah, I had it. And then they'll walk over to the chemical, be like, what's section 4 of the SDS sheet for that chemical? They're not going to know what section 4 is, let alone what it, you know, what they need to know for that chemical. So make sure that they have proper training too. Go over your top 10 chemicals, and go over the SDS sheets. They should know what to do if they accidentally get in their eyes or swallow or spill it on their skin.
There's another term involved there. We talked about yesterday, GHS. OSHA inspector might arrive at a job site or at a facility and ask you about your GHS program. That's synonymous with what we just talked about, and all that means is global harmonization system. You best know if you have a plan or not and be able to answer those questions. If you don't know, now it looks like you don't have training, and now that can be a citable kind of offense. So
exactly, great point.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about lockout tagout. This is another hot button, especially in the manufacturing facilities. And what lockout tagout is, what we're looking for is to make sure that you are doing your very best at controlling any of the hazardous energy that could be present in a machine if an employee is tasked with having to perform service or maintenance. The hazardous energy that we're talking about here is, of course, there's all sorts of different forms, but really we've got electricity, we've got pneumatics, hydraulics, gravity. You have to consider all of these. And what kind of comes into play here is, again, making sure that you have that written program, tells you exactly whose responsibility is what here. And in that written program, you'll see that it's discussed authorized employees versus affected employees. You need to know who's doing what. Under those terms, authorized employees are the ones that are actually applying the locks and the tags and performing the service and maintenance. You want to make sure you're doing your best to protect those folks. All of this, these OSHA citables that we're talking about, yes, highly citable, but if you're not doing your best to mitigate these issues, there's a chance that your employees don't make it home to their families after the end of their shift. And this is one of those areas. Pretty heavily talked about, you got to make sure that you've got written energy control procedures for every single machine that you've got on site. And what that means is you're starting from top to bottom and just listing out how exactly you shut that machine down from start to finish, and then how you actually are able to bring that machine back up to running. And then there's a portion in there that says you really communicate with your employees that are in that area, that you're shutting that machine down and getting ready to perform service and maintenance. So training is also a heavy deal in here. You got to make sure that your employees are trained, new hire training, as well as ongoing training if they're the ones that are the authorized or the affected employees. Periodic inspections have to happen. You've got to go back and kind of reevaluate that program. And then at least every single year, you're checking those control procedures to make sure that nothing has changed. Yeah, and your lockout, tagout action plan should look like this. We've kind of hit on these through the conversation, but really just evaluate every single machine and make sure that you have that corresponding written procedure that goes machine by machine. Here's something else that I've seen. I get out to a site, or I get to meet a new company, and we talk about their lockout tagout program, and I get the bobblehead. Yep, we have a program. Yep, we've trained our employees. But the next thing I ask for is, can you show me where your locks and tags are? And they don't have any of the equipment that is required to lock a machine out. So it's clue number one that you don't have a good, solid, tight program. And then make sure you're going back to audit frequently to make sure that this is the best that it can be to protect your employees.
Awesome. Number 7, fall protection training requirements. We see
Excuse me,
this
guys.
often.
Sorry, Kasey,
Yeah.
to interrupt. We have some questions here, so I just want to
Sure. Fire
just
away.
go over them too. So Walter was saying though that, can I just Google it? So that was probably about 2 slides ago. And then Kaylee says the SDS sheets are almost always listed on the chemical manufacturer's website. They are pretty easy to find and compile into your booklet. They are free PDF combiners online to make your booklet once you have them. So thank you for that. And then Justin just asked, anyone using KHA mobile SDS?
I haven't heard of that one yet, Kasey. Have you guys heard of that, KHA?
No,
Is
What-
that?
There's different
It's
platforms
gotta
that
be,
companies can use to upload their safety data sheets. But in essence, going back to what Kaylee said, you have to actually bring those safety data sheets into the platform that are specific to your facility. And to answer the previous question, I'm wondering if he was talking about, can I just Google it? Googling is amazing. If you're an employee that has a phone outside of the shop floor, if you're curious about something, you definitely can Google it, but your company still has to have those safety data sheets or have it available for you on a platform. We don't rely on just Google. What else, guys?
and if your organization needs help with this, we do, we're partnered with MSDS Online, which is an online service that helps track your chemicals and update them as it goes. So if you're interested, contact your lead OECS associate to help you out with that. Number 7, fall protection, the training requirements. You have to train your employees when they're exposed to fall hazards. It's got to be documented by a competent person, and they must have, they must demonstrate that they've been properly trained. We see this often cited because they'll go through the annual training. They'll go out in the field, they'll put their body harness on. And what does OSHA see? They'll see the D-ring hanging down towards their lower back or the leg straps, they can fit their whole, arms through it. And so OSHA would cite the employer for inadequate training. So then they would need to be retrained. So like I mentioned, document the training. They need to be trained before they're exposed. They can't go out to the job site and you're going to do the fall protection training a week later. Check their knowledge. It's a great idea, especially when they could be faced with multiple hazards. Check their knowledge, see where they're at. And this could be done through audits. Audits are a great way to find out what they're exposed to and a great way to educate them. Ensure proper and consistent use of the fall protection gear. So again, they should inspect their body harnesses prior to using it each day. They should, wear a chest level, the strap, the D-ring should be between the shoulder blades, the leg strap should be on and be able just to slide your hand through. Have that fall protection plan. Again, we see a lot of people lacking this and having that rescue part of that plan, going through it. So everyone's on the same page. Who's going to do what? Who's going to call 911? Who's going to get the ladder? Who's going to get the scissor lift? How are we going to get them down? So have that.
this is for just your information. If they see someone wearing a harness incorrectly, they'll get a citation. Because the one that's going to carry more monetary, the bigger penalty will be for inadequate training. So you might get an $800 penalty that you're observed with no fall protection. You'll get $1,000 penalty for inadequate training. So always don't just blow this training off, because that's where the bigger dollars are going to be.
Exactly. Number 8, PPE, eye and face protection. We see this. Always see this. PPE is required when they're exposed to flying particles, gas, chemicals, or vapors. The employer needs to enforce the use of PPE when the hazards are present. Side protector, you have to have those on. You see a lot of people with prescription glasses. First of all, they need to be prescription safety glasses to the ANSI Z87, and then they have to have the side shields on. In the state of Minnesota, the employee has to purchase prescription safety glasses. A lot of employers are offering to purchase it because obviously saving someone's eye compared to paying $200-300 is definitely worth the investment.
Yeah.
For some reason, if an employer doesn't want to pay, they can offer protective goggles to go over their prescription.
And a face shield is not safety glasses.
Yeah, so we see this a lot, not wearing the so when someone's using a grinder, right, they'll have the safety glasses on, but they won't have the face shield.
Right.
So this is where the proper face protection happens. And you could see from this gentleman that he didn't have the face shield on, the grinder blade broke. Now it's lodged in his face. So you got to identify the hazards, develop a PPE assessment, what you're going to need. Incorporate your employees in the selection of PPE because they're the ones that are going to be wearing it. They should, it should be comfortable to them. If it's not comfortable, you're already behind the 8 ball. They're probably most likely not going to wear it. So involve them in the selection process, train them on the proper use and limitations, and maintain it in good working order. A lot of times in construction, I've seen how many safety glasses with scratches, dents, you gotta replace it and make sure it's in great working order, that they're properly taking care of it.
But just remember, on the hierarchy of safety, it's the last resort, the last. It should have been taken care of under the engineering. But they blew that off and they said, well, we'll take it down to, just like a fall protection, wearing a harness. Should have been guardrail system, but instead they went that direction. And if something fails, well, we have a fatality.
Mm-hmm.
This is a good example right here.
Right. Lots of fatalities, severe injuries coming out of powered industrial trucks, otherwise known as your forklift. This area that was cited has a lot to do with maintenance and just general operation, safe operation of forklifts. And keep in mind, this also includes motorized pallet jacks, treated like the same under the general industry idea of forklifts. Again, you got to have a good solid training program, training employees from new hire on up. If somebody comes into your company and says, well, I have 20 years of forklift experience, I'm ready to go, you still have to do your due diligence to go back and train them. Make sure that they can prove that they are a good, solid forklift operator. A couple of other areas where citations came in here is maybe you're doing the training, but you didn't document it. And I think, Kasey, we've talked through this a few times. If you're not documenting it, you're not doing it. So your action plan should look like this. You really, from the start, identify those employees who are tasked with operating a forklift and then making sure that they have proper training. And the training should include not only classroom, you got to test their knowledge a little bit to make sure that they understand what you're training on. And then you've got to make sure that they get on that machinery and prove to you that they know how to operate it. And all of this has got to be documented. Kasey said it earlier, if you're not documenting it, it's not happening. So document and just number 4 on here, I can't stress enough. If you do see what I call bad behavior or questionable behavior that could hurt somebody in the plant or out on the job site, take your time to correct those behaviors. Retraining, take all of those moments and do the retraining and then document that. And then ensure that your employees are also conducting daily forklift inspections, daily and every shift forklift inspection. Make sure that those are documented, and if there's any issues with your forklift, make sure that those get to see maintenance. Otherwise, your forklift could malfunction, and that's a major area of injury and fatality. So do your best where the forklifts are concerned.
So on the construction side, I did an audit this morning, and they had operators there. And remember, they need to be certified every 3 years. I ran it. He's like, I'm a journeyman, and I was like, well, when did you get last certified? And it was like 10 years ago. So just because you got certified every 3 years in forklifts. And again, when an accident happens, they have to go through retraining. I don't know how many times I've been on a job site for an accident investigation. The forklift guy hit something and he didn't get retrained. Well, you got to retrain him. And then what we're seeing a lot is the annual inspection documentation issues. It's got to be done by a competent person, and it has to be done to the manufacturer's specifications in their manual every 12 months. So make sure, it's great to have that sticker right in the cab saying when the last annual inspection was done, because that's what they're looking for.
You know, another thing that OECS is really good about doing is making sure that on those off years, even train everybody on forklift. And that means any of the pedestrians, any of the office folks that end up out in the facility. It's just give your pedestrians a good training too, so that they know what to watch for when you've got forklifts that are traveling in very close proximity of your employees. So good ads, you guys. Thank you. Last but not least, let's talk about number 10. The heavy hitter here is machine guarding. This covers a lot of ground when we talk about machine guarding. And what's really happening is you're really just trying to prevent your employees from coming into contact with any of the rotating, moving, operating parts of a machine. There is a term in here that I want to refresh you on or remind you of, is when you're talking about machine guarding, the term is OSHA. It's actually an acronym that helps you to remember to keep your employees' hands and body parts out of the machine. And what that acronym stands for is you've got to protect any part of that machine that an employee can get over, under, through, or around. And so what that means is you're not only, like, take for example a press, the employee works at the front of the machine. You've also got to now protect the sides and the back so that employees can't accidentally and inadvertently come into contact with any operating parts of those machines. You're also making sure that on some of your handheld equipment, those manufacturer's instructions come with safety precautions that tell you not to remove the guards on those machines. Kasey, I think you showed a picture of an injury where in your PPE presentation, but maybe go back to the beginning of that. Did that hand grinder have the guard on it? And maybe that was the whole start of the issue. So let's talk about the action plan a little bit. There's a few things that you can do in here to make sure that your employees are fully covered. And it's really just going in, and first it starts with just go back out and just identify all of your machinery, do some sort of a hazard assessment, and check every single one of your machines for open areas that an employee could come into contact with moving parts. And then do your best to make sure that you guard those up. If you're not sure about this, run this by one of your OECSers and we'll be happy to help you with it. The last part of this that I want to remind you of is really train your employees not to take those guards off. This is culprit to a lot of these issues that we talk about. Now, when there's a missing guard, there's definitely a chance for some severe injury, if not worse. So do your best there.
So I'm going to briefly talk about this. This is information that anybody can get, but this is what to expect from OSHA in 2022, their national and local state of Minnesota emphasis programs. So OSHA can visit you in how many different ways? Targeted inspections or imminent danger?
Local.
Yeah. So for targeted inspections, it's always number one's usually construction, right? Mm-hmm. Number two, we see food manufacturing. Number three, beverage and tobacco manufacturing. And then rounding out the top five, paper, plastics and rubber products manufacturing. Nothing earth shattering about that.
Those are surprising.
Yeah. So the national emphasis, they're going to really harp on trying to decrease amputations in general industry, combustible dust in general industry, lead in health, process safety managements in health and general industries. Number five, silica. That's huge on the construction side of things. They really emphasize that a lot. And then rounding out the national is trenching hazards. Excavations and trenchings was the number one cause of fatalities in the state of Minnesota. So, but the local emphasis, they're going to really look at foundries. Number two, grain facilities. Three, healthcare. Four, hex chrome. So anytime you're doing stainless steel welding, it produces hex chrome. And then rounding out the top five is isocyanate, which is your lining in the beds of your trucks, types of products that they're going to really emphasize. Those areas.
After respiratory protection. On the last two, for sure.
Yes, for sure. So, some of the key takeaways: ensure your company has written programs highlighting the responsibilities, who's responsible for what the foreman's responsible, what the employees are responsible, what your safety director, manager, or the owners are responsible. It must be document your training and save those records. How long should they save training records for? Would you recommend, Andy?
I guess I just put them on a flash drive and kept them.
Yeah. Don't get rid of them, basically. Perform and document job site and work site hazard analysis. So these audits that we do for you guys, keep those. And then enforce your policies and document it. This is where we get, because in Minnesota, you have an AWARE program. And one of the caveats of it is you must have a disciplinary program, part of it. And so a lot of times OSHA will come out in a job and did you do anything? Oh yeah, I talked to Bobby over there that wasn't wearing his safety glasses while using a hammer. Okay, show me where you did that. And
Well,
so
when you look at the key takeaways, that is your AWARE. They want to know what the programs are, what the responsibilities are, what is the goal, what's the objectives, do you have training, did you do a hazard assessment, did you come up with controls, and how are you going to enforce it if somebody steps out of line? Those are the key elements of an AWARE program. In Minnesota is a requirement. You will have an AWARE program. So that would be the first question they ask. Do you have an AWARE program?
And it doesn't have to be negative observations, right? It can be positive stuff like
Right.
Bobby was wearing his safety glasses and hard hat today. Great job. So I always recommend to the superintendents when they usually have daily notes, make some observations that they saw as it relates to safety. And it will go a long way because I could show OSHA that documentation.
That's right.
The soup was walking around and he wasn't hiding out in his trailer all day. So definitely document it. We have 10 minutes left, it looks like. So this is a great opportunity for you to ask any questions as it relates to anything that we talked about or anything OSHA related. Andy's a great resource. So feel free to use that chat box in the below there to fire us some questions.
And well, before we wrap up, Kasey, I just want to remind everybody that's on today that OECS offers continuing CEs, continuing credits. If anybody is interested in receiving any information on that, just enter that in the chat and our admin group will get you the information you need for your CEs.
Yeah, great way to get those CEs credits in.
Well, let me finish this. This week between the Monday and tomorrow, it's National Stand Down for Fall Protection. We just got done having a National Stand Down for Struck By, which is just as ongoing as it is for falls. Upcoming will be National Stand Down for Trenching. In other words, we try to make sure that all the firms are fully aware that we like to stand down for a specific purpose. Last week, on the 28th, was National Stand Down for, and it's on the 28th, was when OSHA first came into existence in 71. So it's Workers' Memorial Day. We have to take homage of what took place in the last 12 months with how many people. In construction, in falls, there was 1,000 people that perished last year. That's way too many.
Yep. So contact your OECS associate. And how many toolbox talks have we done, this week? It's been quite a few because we like to be involved in these stand downs because it's very important. As Andy said, 1,000 lives is too much. Heather, you had a question for us to answer?
Sorry, Sue had put her hand up, so I was going to allow her to talk. So Sue, if you want to chat, or if you accidentally raise your hand, otherwise you can put your question in the chat. And we do have, Donnell has said, can a copy of last month's training be sent out as well today?
So I think any of our past webinars that have been offered, you can find those on our OECS website. Any past webinar is there for you to watch any time that you want that to be available to you in your groups.
So Sue was asking about the intrinsic batteries. Am I saying that right, guys? We have trouble getting them because of shortages. Someone told me that there are not any difference between regular and intrinsic batteries, only the green sticker.
Intrinsic batteries?
Is that it? Is that what they're called? Okay, thank you for helping me that.
Tell me, intrinsic batteries, having trouble getting them because of shortages. I'm not sure of the differences between these. That's something that, Kasey, do you have any input on that? Otherwise, we can find information on that and get back to Sue.
Yeah, coming from an ironwork background, I never tried to get in a forklift there or deal with batteries, but that is something that we could look up and get back to you. If you want to leave us your email or phone number, we'll for surely look into that and get that answer for you.
I'm curious because when you get into the, you're looking at that specific, are you looking for equipment going into a confined space?
It's for radio use.
Okay, which could be into a confined space, right? That's where you would run into that specific type of battery, into an unknown hazards that could cause problems if there's a spark. We run into the batteries, we run into the tools and the equipment into the same scenario.
Interesting.
Or I think sometimes in combustible types of situations.
Where you run into it.
Explosive, there you go. Yeah.
Sue's saying some plants require them all the time, sometimes for explosive environments.
I'll check in. I'll take that one. I'll try to find some information for you, Sue, and we'll get back to you on it. But it's a challenge these days when it's tough to get a hold of the equipment that is so needed. Safety and all the way around. So we'll check into that for you.
Any other questions? We got a couple minutes here left. I see a good question here is how many OSHA in the state of Minnesota, how many did they recently hire? I get this question a lot because
it's a great question. They looked at how many have retired, 9 retired, so we replaced 9 individuals, and then they hired 9 new people. So they've increased their staff by probably 15% now. And it's indicating to everybody that there's going to be more inspections made throughout the state, not just one general area. Just as is the case for construction, they're going to increase the amount of inspections in construction. Without knowing who's in the audience, I kind of direct this, and hopefully you paid attention. There's concerns in all the areas. Always know what you're exposing your employees to. If you're working in manufacturing, you should have a great handle on the chemicals because you'll be doing that inventory daily. Construction, we tell them, just bring what you have and bring the safety data sheet of what you're using. Don't bring me a textbook with 500 different chemicals, but because the time might come and I need to have that answer immediately. I don't need to be looking at a textbook.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that.
Andy.
All right, well, if you do have any questions, we'll definitely get back to you here. Kind of our final poll, we like to always improve these webinars and get your feedback. It's a great use to us, and you know, we like to know. So Heather, if you would take care of this final poll score in our webinar. 3, great info, very helpful. 2, good info, few takeaways, or 1, poor, missed the mark.
We're about 65% answered so far. So keep.
All right,
more
I'll just,
Probably some people have already left.
No, we're at 80% now.
We've got Kasey's information, my information with email addresses and telephone numbers. If anybody needs anything, please go ahead and reach out to us. We'll do our best to
Yeah.
answer and to help.
and then finally, Donna talked about this earlier. You can get CE credits for this. You get an hour, 1 hour contact hour. You'll receive an evaluation following this webinar. Just complete and return it. Once it's completed and returned, the evaluation, you'll be given credit for completion. So definitely do that. If you have safety certifications, it's great to get those CEs in. Finally, we'd like to thank you for your time joining us. Andy and I had a great time sharing information. Hopefully this is helpful for you. If you have any questions whatsoever, contact Donna or myself or your lead OECS associate.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a great day and happy Cinco de Mayo. So
Is that today or tomorrow?
today,
Is it?
yep. All right.
Oh, that's.
You guys have a great day. Thanks. Bye.
What time you got?